Horror games scare us in numerous ways. Sometimes it's the premise being so dark and disturbing that you can't help but imagine yourself in that predicament. Other times it's the jump scares catching you off guard after minutes of quiet, tense buildup. But then, there are horror games that don't really fit into either of those categories. They're strange, uncomfortable, and the kind of unsettling that you can't even explain. And that's where this game comes in. A game where you spend your days hunting squirrels and stapling them onto your dead wife's corpse. Yeah, I wasn't kidding. Oh, and while you're doing that, you're waiting for the arrival of God, who is coming in 5 days. Frankly, this premise is just absurd. You have more questions than answers, and frankly, it's kind of funny in a weird way. And yet somehow it still manages to be one of the most unnerving horror experiences I've ever experienced. And the reason for this isn't just the shock value, it's the atmosphere, the weird details you find, and the way everything feels slightly wrong. Throughout the game, it constantly shoves you deeper and deeper into insanity, leaving you feeling at the end scared, confused, and intrigued. So, with all of that being said, let's go through this game, day by day, moment by moment, what actually happens in Squirrel Stapler, and why does this weird little game have such a huge impact on anyone that touches it? Well, let's find out. You awaken in a dark room. It's silent. The only sounds you hear being your own footsteps and the surrounding flies. Looking to your right, you see a corpse tied to a wall. We came here to get away from it all, so that our love might blossom. But our love has not blossomed. Look at my beloved. The flies have made her ugly and rotten. I wish she were beautiful, like the squirrels of the wood. And so, I will cover her with the squirrels of the wood. If you haven't guessed, this is your wife, and immediately take into consideration your player's mental state, coming to the conclusion that yeah, he's batshit insane. As you wander through this cabin, you spot an empty kitchen along with a pentagram including some holy scroll scripture. Every day, this scripture changes, and this is the formula the game kinda goes with. Throughout the world, you will find pages of information that are constantly changing with each new day, and while it's a simple concept, it truly elevates the pacing and becomes a huge motivating factor in continuing to play. You then arrive at your front door, a bloody message on the wall next to it reading, "In 5 days, God is coming." With that information, you leave and you start your first day. You're given a rifle with some tips, and you're now fit to explore the woods, hunting for squirrels. Starting with this dead one that just doesn't know how to read so good. Now before you start your squirrel hunting experience, there are some gameplay mechanics that you should be aware of. First of all, sprinting in this game, just like in real life, is loud and will cause any nearby squirrels to flee upon hearing you. So with the help of crouching, along with your trusty map and compass, you must sneak and locate different squirrel locations, hunting them individually. You're first required to hunt 5 squirrels, and if you're lucky, some might even be a double squirrel, so that's cool. After hunting the 5, you can either return home to your wife or you can explore the forest, and looking at your map, you will find 2 areas of interest. One in the middle and the other on the top left. Traveling to those areas, you would find 2 different pages, one being a story and the other being some sort of status report. Traveling to the middle, you begin reading this abstract story. It tells the tale of an artist purchasing a paintbrush with a bristle he thought was made from a woman's hair, in which he then painted a portrait of who that woman must have been. After painting her, he then realized that the bristle he thought was from a woman's hair was actually from a wild boar. This is the first page of the story, and it's kind of confusing, but keep in mind it will all make sense in the upcoming days. Traveling to the other question mark, you will find a status report located on the complete opposite side of the map. The status report reads, "Nothing abnormal to report. Some marginal abnormalities that went away once I recalibrated. Some odd noises during the night, probably squirrels. Overall, everything is pretty quiet." Besides the weird story of the painter, this series of reports is by far the most crucial thing to check on every day, as it will explain certain plot points and add to the creepy atmosphere. Also, while exploring, you will find a cabin called the Shady Shack in which you can commit sins to double your score. Now, I don't know what kind of sins this guy could be committing, but if stapling squirrels to his wife is a normal occurrence to him, then I don't want to think about what committing sins means. But nonetheless, if you choose to commit sins, you will get a cute little photo along with your points being doubled, so good job. But after a long day of squirrel hunting, you finally arrive home, and I want to take this point to really gush about the sound design. Hey Into the Forest feels incredible. Even though it's just simple ambience, the game never uses music. You hear peaceful environmental sounds, squirrels squeaking, and cheerful noises when collecting certain power-ups. It's almost ironic considering all of the heinous shit your character does once he arrives home. The quiet inside the house, the sound of your own footsteps and flies, creates a sharp, unsettling contrast that highlights just how unhinged your character really is. You then enter your bedroom, in which you staple your hard day's work onto your wife before heading to sleep. It's the next day. The cabin is as quiet as ever, and you get yourself ready for another day of hunting. As you leave, your character states that they must hunt the big squirrel. And you then commence your day of hunting. It's honestly pretty peaceful. The bright ambience, the beautiful colors of the forest, it's all really calming until a vengeful squirrel spirit attacks you, which is also a new mechanic. Now, out of the blue, vengeful squirrel spirits can come and attack you, taking off a little bit of your health if they get too close. Luckily, you have a gun, and you can put them down in one shot, and if it manages to damage you, there are multiple places to regenerate your health around the map, so nothing really to worry about as of now. After hunting all 5 again and luring out the big squirrel and hunting that as well, you again have some time to roam free around the forest, and returning to the middle question mark, you get part 2 of the story. Now, the artist has become severely attached to this portrait that he painted, taking it on long walks and literally weeping from the fact he can't have her in person. But then, after a great chunk of time, he runs into an old woman who gives him an offer to bring his portrait to life. The man is overjoyed and accepts the offer, but after they get started with the ritual, he realizes that he only painted the woman from the waist up. It's an interesting addition and really gives the player something to think about, again being a brilliant example of this game's pacing. Following that, you can then return to the cabin for the second addition to the status report, which reads, "Small abnormal readings still occurring with odd regularity. Recalibrating always fixes them, but they come back the next day. I also keep finding dead squirrels outside the door. Looks like maybe an animal is leaving them, but I'm noting it as per my instructions." Now, things are getting weird, considering that for the past 2 days, dead squirrels have been showing up outside of our house as well. Is it the poisonous grass, or maybe something else is leaving them there? Returning home is the same as yesterday, dark hallways, a quiet ambience, only until you reach your bedroom. For some reason, there is now a note, and reading it is very disturbing.
"I don't want squirrels. I want skin. Give me back my skin, or give me yours instead."
Being that this is next to your wife, it's easy to presume that it's from her, and that's what I thought as well. But taking into consideration how just insane you are as the protagonist, it's fair to assume these are your inner thoughts. The note saying "give me back my skin" could correlate to the protagonist stealing his wife's skin for themselves, the note being an externalization of his own guilt. But yet, after reading it, we do nothing. We continue stapling the squirrels to the corpse and head back to bed like nothing has changed. We wake up on the 3rd day and step outside as usual, except this time, things have changed. There are predators now. To be exact, squirrel bears. It's another new twist on the gameplay. Remember how I said those squirrel spirits weren't dangerous? Well, now they technically are. Spirit squirrels still go down in one shot, but squirrel bears take 3, and you only have 5 bullets. That means you've got to think strategically. Do you burn 3 rounds to kill a bear, leaving yourself with just 2 bullets for anything else? Or do you sneak and preserve your ammo? And while it might sound simple enough to avoid them, here's the catch. Squirrel bears are attracted to loud noises. Gunshots, attacks, it all pulls them in, so every shot you take is a pretty big risk, and if you die, you restart the day. But I regret to inform you that that's not the only change. Starting your day, you might pick up the regular dead squirrels outside of your house, but this time, there's something out there. Not a squirrel bear, not a squirrel, something you and the protagonist both had never seen before. This predicament goes unexplained, and the creature tracks are only hinted at during the end of the game, so for now you're left in confusion. Continuing through the day, you're given the same requirements as yesterday: hunt 5 squirrels and 1 big squirrel, so you get to work. After finishing the hunt, you return back to the question marks, the first one being the third part of the story, this time becoming more sinister. Instead of summarizing it like I did for the previous entry, I'm gonna read it, because you kinda need to in order to understand it. The newly created half-woman screamed and wailed, clawing her way in circles around the room as blood poured from the bottom of her torso and entrails flopped around in tangles. The artist sobbed and looked to the old woman, who was examining the pennies he'd given her, unfazed. She caught his gaze, shrugged, and said, "I reserve a special spell for these circumstances." She pointed to an axe mounted on the wall. This is once again a brilliant but deeply unsettling addition to the story. It's grotesque, theatrical, and almost reads like a lost page from some kind of twisted, fairy tale. In fact, after reading it, it gave me the same vibe as reading W.W. Jacobs' The Monkey's Paw, a short horror story about desire, greed, and the horrific consequences of wishing for something unnatural. In the story, it follows the White family, who received a cursed monkey's paw that grants 3 wishes, but granting these wishes causes unforeseen consequences. After receiving the paw from a friend, the father, Mr. White, wishes for money. But their son, Hubert, suddenly dies in a factory accident with the money received as compensation. Distraught, Mrs. White forces her husband to use the second wish to bring Herbert back to life. But when a horrific figure starts knocking on the door, Mr. White uses the final wish to make the figure disappear. It's a gripping story with a parallel that's striking. Both stories are about human desperation colliding with unforeseen consequences. The artists, like Mr. and Mrs. White, both reach for something impossible to create life where it does not belong. And in both cases, the result is not a miracle, but a grotesque mockery. Something broken and something that is worse than death itself. That's what makes the story so powerful in the context of Squirrel Stapler. It's not just a grotesque story thrown in there for shock value, it's a story that reinforces the game's central theme, that the refusal to accept loss leads to monstrosity. Whether it's stapling squirrels to revive your wife or trying to bring a portrait to life, these are both doomed and flawed attempts to rewrite the laws of nature. After reading this entry in the story, you return to the second question mark, this time getting the third entry in the status report. There's something in the woods here that we didn't expect. I keep finding tracks and I hear it at night, moving through the foliage and scratching on the concrete, and in the morning there are squirrels outside with their limbs all pulled off and their heads twisted around. Dozens of them, requesting a call for instructions on how to proceed. This is an important moment as it's the first confirmation that there's something else in the woods. Not a squirrel, not a predator, but some kind of monster. Afterward, you return home and find your wife not in her usual spot, but in the kitchen, calmly sitting in a chair. Over the past 2 days, she's always been in the same room, but now, somehow she's moved on her own. She's still very much a corpse, which raises the obvious question of how did she get there? But for now, you staple the squirrels onto her body and head to bed, bringing day 3 to a close. It's day 4. You wake up and assume your normal routine of hunting, and by this point in the game, there will be no gameplay changes. So, you get to hunting again. This part genuinely scared the shit out of me. I don't want to come off as a tough guy that says he doesn't get scared, but growing older and having played so many horror games, I hate to say it, I genuinely don't get startled from video games anymore. But this scare got me, and it was mostly due to the brilliance of this game's design. I mentioned earlier about the sound design, but what I haven't mentioned is how it coincides perfectly with the visuals. Because you have to stop and listen for squirrels while trying to locate them from the foliage, it creates such an interesting tunnel vision that acts as the perfect setup for a jump scare. Now, I'm not going to act like Squirrel Stapler is the only game that does this, because there are a handful I can name that do. But what most of those games do that this game does better is its pacing. This game is pretty short, the runtime being around 2 hours. And within those 2 hours, there aren't a lot of scares. So you're probably thinking, How is that any good? Well, for a horror game, a lot of them rely on jump scares to keep you scared, and the pacing of a jump scare is pretty simple. There's a build-up and then a sudden burst of horror before settling down to do it over and over and over. And while this can be entertaining, for me, it just becomes exhausting and leads to the strength that Squirrel Stapler has over its contemporaries. It's more about making you uncomfortable than it is flooding you with jump scares in the hope of startling you. And by the time the game wraps up, it pulls the rug from under you, giving you a bigger scare that sticks with you way more than any other horror game would do. And even though we're only on day 4, I can assure you, it delivers on that statement. Returning to the story of the painter, we get our 4th installment, which I will summarize because reading it will probably get me demonetized. So with the old woman pointing to an axe mounted to the wall, the man takes it, crying, and begins murdering his brought-to-life portrait. This entry is pretty bare bones, yet very important, as it signifies his separation from his obsession, that being the portrait and creating life. And even though it's brutal and shocking, the idea of it could lead you to believe he's on the right path of moving on. But holy shit, just wait. Following this, we return to our 4th status report, in which we get a bombshell. It's in the walls now, in the concrete, looking for my brain. It can't find it because my brain is inside my skull, but it will. It will peel away my skin and bone to get inside. When my brain is taken, I will come for you. I will break you open. I will take yours instead. I'm in the shadows now. I am seeing you cower. You are already stretched apart into pieces. Your head is already twisted off the spine. Now, what does this mean? To put it simply, the author of this note has fallen into madness. The writing describes how whatever this thing is has gotten so deep that it's become inescapable. At first, there's a belief that their brain is safe inside their skull, but they eventually figure out it will be taken. And once that happens, the writer won't even exist as the same person anymore. What remains will be someone completely unrecognizable, hunting others for their brains. In short, this serves as a symbol of being consumed by one's own passion, an idea that will be reinforced very soon. By the end of the note, it's unclear whether the writer is even in control, since the message directly threatens the reader. But I find the most chilling part about this series of reports is how it shows the writer's decline from being a hunter in control to now being eaten alive and taken over by their own passion. It serves as a metaphor that eventually the same fate awaits us. We return home and walk up to our beloved, stapling the squirrels onto her as we begin to sleep for the final day. It is now day 5, the final day in the game, and the day God will be coming. Now this is a big and important moment for this game, as throughout the entire experience you had this plot point dangling over you in the background. After getting new information on plot points and story beats, getting caught up in any side activity this game has to offer, you would always be reminded that God was coming in 5 days. You leave your house like any other day and are tasked with the same tasks. Kill 5 squirrels and 1 extra large squirrel. Throughout the 5 days, it was never really scary, as you knew by the end of your hunt you would have to go back home. But now, God is coming. You have no idea what that means, or what's waiting for you after this. So hunting down these last few squirrels is genuinely very nerve-wracking. Returning to the final part of the story, it reads, "The artist's ears rang as he turned to the old woman and said, 'What is this unspeakable horror that you have brought to me? How can I ever escape what has been done here? What penny spell can you cast to conjure good from this?' And the old woman examined the bloody mess and said, 'Well, young man, this will make a mighty fine stew.' And so they made a stew from the remains, but it was poison, and they both died. Art will eventually destroy the artist. The end." Remember how I said that the idea of passion taking over you will be reinstated? This is what I meant. This is the official confirmation that the entire message behind the story is becoming so taken over by your own art and passion that it destroys you. And knowing that this is supposed to symbolize the messaging in Squirrel Stapler, that's who we are supposed to be. The artist who gets destroyed by the very thing they love doing. So now knowing that and having the realization, we travel to the final status report. This one reading, "Please disregard previous reports. Everything is quiet." A callback to the very first status report. The author has officially become taken over, and so we will eventually be taken over as well. After this, we're given no choice but to collect the last squirrel, in which this happens. This, to me, is the perfect ending for a game like this. It shocks you, sure, but it doesn't end on just a simple jump scare. Instead, it leaves you on a high point, a moment where everything you've been reading, seeing, and theorizing comes together. You finally begin to understand the weight of the past 5 days and the toll and purpose of your actions. The odd reports you read, the weird story, the creeping sense of something always looming over you, and then it hits. The culmination of all the slow, uncomfortable buildup landing perfectly on your dome. As I mentioned before, most horror games constantly throw jump scares at you, and after a while, they just become noise. But Squirrel Stapler utilizes that time to make you feel uneasy for hours before giving you that satisfying final shock. And the beauty of it, the final scare isn't just a scare, it's a payoff. It's the realization of the story's themes, the embodiment of the metaphor revolving around obsession and passion consuming you. It's brilliant because it's earned, it's thoughtful, and it sticks with you long after the game is over. That combination of dread, revelation, and catharsis is why this ending works so perfectly, and is the focal point in why I chose to talk about Squirrel Stapler. It's also just an indie game that's made by a really good developer, who also made Iron Lung, by the way, that just needs more recognition. I remember talking about Alan Wake 2 and how the ambitions of that game need to be preserved in order to keep the bar high for the evolution of video games. And while that game was excellent, that was aimed more towards AAA games. For an indie game to pull off such an insane premise and wrap it up together ever so neatly is not only extremely impressive, but is something this industry could benefit with more of. I appreciate you for sticking around this long ass video. It was a doozy to create. I hope you enjoyed it. And I love y'all so much, and I hope you guys have a blessed day. Peace out.